New York Mets still have an opportunity this offseason to add an all-star caliber outfielder via trade. In this video, we are talking about why the Mets should make the move for Luis Robert Jr. Let's get into it. All right, Mets fans, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the True Mets Talk podcast. It's your boy CP. And clearly, in this video, we're talking about Chicago White Sox center fielder Luis Robert Jr. and why he makes perfect sense via trade for the New York Mets in this offseason as they are trying to understand what the market has left to offer. We're talking about potentially re-signing Pete Alonso. We're talking about adding external options in Anthony Santander and the continued interest in other free agents in the outfield, such as Luis Robert Jr., Jesse Winker, and Jurickson Profar. Before we get into this video, please do hit those like buttons, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content, and make sure to comment your thoughts and opinions on a potential Luis Robert Jr. addition. Now, I've talked about Luis Robert Jr. on this channel before, actually in this off season, quite a bit ago. This was probably going on 1 to 2 months ago. I'll link that video where I discussed him down in the description down below, so you can get a feel for, how I was talking about a potential Robert Jr. trade back then versus the same sentiments that I am echoing right here. And I wanted to get more deeper. I want to get deeper into why he is such a perfect fit with the way that the Mets have their personnel set up right now in the outfield, in particular with their left fielder in Brandon Nimmo, who we've talked about recently on the channel as well, and his outlook injury-wise going into the 2025 season, and whether we're having some DH discussions surrounding Brandon Nimmo. But let's take a look at the type of player that Luis Robert Jr. is. Now, I understand that he has spent his entire career, 5 seasons, on the south side of Chicago in a Chicago White Sox uniform. And we all know 2024 was not pretty at all for that organization. And a lot of their players, whether they were superstar caliber or not, had pretty down seasons. And Luis Robert Jr. was definitely one of them. You can see the comparisons in his 2023 All-Star campaign versus the type of season that he had in 2024. Now, I will say the injury concern looms large with Robert Jr., and that is a risk that any team will have to take on, especially when you look at those numbers in 2023, is exactly why you make this type of move and don't think twice about it. In 2023, he posted 145 games, a 264 batting average of 38 home runs and 36 doubles. The OPS was above 850. And conversely, you see in 2024, major struggles, only 100 games played, 224 batting average. The power dipped. The doubles gap-to-gap power dipped as well. The OPS was just above 650, a night and day difference. Now, again, going back to the injury concerns, there's only been 2 seasons of his first 5 seasons in the big leagues where Luis Robert Jr. has played 100 or more games. And if you want to up that threshold to 120 plus games, he has only done it 1 time in his career so far in the first 5 years. But again, the tools that he has as an everyday player, or maybe even a platoon player for the New York Mets, could pay dividends in an astronomical way when you're trying to construct the best lineup possible and are trying to move different pieces around to try to put together a well-rounded team. Now, you take a look at also the walk and the strikeout percentage. I don't really have much to say there other than the fact that he did walk at a higher rate in 2024, didn't really do him any good, and he also struck out at a higher clip. That's something that we have to realize with Robert Jr. is that even in a peak season for Robert Jr., he is still going to post well above average, league average strikeout rates. That's the type of player that he is. He sells out for power. And if he's not hitting for power, a lot of people probably aren't going to like the type of hitter that he is. But the same critics that critique high strikeout rates are probably also the same fans that like Teoscar Hernandez and Mark Vientos, 2 guys that also notably strike out at above league average rate. The WRC plus, weighted runs created plus, that Fangraphs metric also went down. But again, when we talk about the situational fit and the speed and range that he has, not only in the outfield as a center fielder, where he spent the first 5 full seasons of his career at positionally, but also on the base paths, as he is a consistent threat to steal 20 plus bases. And this is something that we've wanted as Mets fans collectively for quite some time, is a team that knows how to steal bases and isn't afraid to do so. And I do think that the Mets have done a better job in 2024 in that area. They still have a lot of room to improve in terms of being a top base stealing threat of an organization, and Robert Jr. would just add on to that. But let's just take a look at the recent report here from Bleacher Report in a potential mock trade with the New York Mets and the Chicago White Sox involving Robert Jr. coming over the Queens in exchange for Ronnie Mauricio. You can call him a utility at this player at this point, because he can DH, and I'm talking about Mauricio here. He can DH, he can play second, as he showed in 2023 in September when he was a September call up, and he also can play third base with that well above average arm. Now, the range and the footwork is also something that a lot of teams and the New York Mets as well, if they decide to keep him, are going to have to continue to work on. But the fact that he is so young, he's 23 going on 24, I believe he turns 24 in April. This is something that Chicago and the White Sox are clearly rebuilding. They could use this youth movement to their advantage and mold Mauricio into the type of player ultimately and at the position that they want him at. Now, this actual, not report, but this mock trade, as Bleacher Report is very well known for doing, is only a mock trade. It's just that. Nothing solidified, nothing concrete, and what we've heard between the Mets discussions with the Chicago White Sox for a Robert Jr. trade. Earlier, we heard the two teams having discussions for a potential Garrett Crochet trade before he went to the Red Sox. I have no doubt in my mind that the Mets are keeping an eye out on this market for Luis Robert Jr. And this is very advantageous, but also depends on a numerous variety of factors, particularly starting at what happens with Pete Alonso, right? Because from there, you either have to shift your focus, if you don't get Pete Alonso, to an Anthony Santander, and adding Anthony Santander into the mix with the Luis Robert Jr. doesn't really make sense in the light that I'm going to paint here, in the picture that I'm going to paint here for you of why Robert Jr. makes sense positionally for the New York Mets. But I will say, when it comes to this mock trade, I don't think it's enough. I understand Ronnie Mauricio is electric. I understand that he's going to have a lot to offer the New York Mets and any other potential team that he ends up on via trade if the Mets do part ways with him. But when you talk about, again, the upside and the caliber of player that Luis Robert Jr. is and has been, especially in 2023, this one-for-one deal is not going to be enough. And if it takes sweetening the pot, so to speak, a little bit for the New York Mets to get the Chicago White Sox a little bit more comfortable, I would even add on some pitching help, maybe Dom Hamill, who's a top 15 prospect in the Mets farm system, or maybe even another infielder, a young prospect that is still trying to find his footing in the Mets minor league farm system, in Colin Houck, who's, I believe, only 21 going on 22 years old. But again, the reason for this is, and I didn't mention this in this slide, so let's just go back to it, $15 million in 2025 Luis Robert Jr. is supposed to make. And after the 2025 season, he has two club option years, both at $20 million apiece, which again, at his peak, and this is all projectability at this point with Luis Robert, you're not going to sort of trade for a guy that's going to replicate, or at least you think is going to replicate, his 2024 numbers, not by a large margin. But as it pertains to the situational fit that I wanted to go back and sort of surround and round out this podcast episode by speaking on, is that if we have injury concerns for Brandon Nimmo, who's a lefty, and we are already talking about, as I have done, as Rob has done on his channel, talking about Brandon Nimmo potentially being a platoon DH option and maybe even transitioning into a full-time DH option for the New York Mets in future seasons, whether it's 2026 or 2027. This type of player that has the capability of being an everyday center fielder, but also moving over to a corner outfield spot, the range, his defensive capabilities, the arm is a little bit subpar, which is why I'm introducing this potential transition from center to left. But when you take a look at the range, the defensive runs saved was 6 in 2023. I know it was only 1 in 2024. That needs to improve and get back on track. But again, at his peak, he's not only a power threat at the plate, who is right-handed, but also a very good defender. And this lefty-righty dynamic is everything that Mets fans have been talking about with a potential Starling Marte and Jesse Winker platoon situation at DH. So why not up the score and potentially just platoon two all-star caliber players in Brandon Nimmo and Luis Robert Jr. between left field and DH? Mets fans, let me know what you think of this thought. Should Luis Robert Jr. at this point of offseason be on the radar of the New York Mets? In addition to Pete Alonso, because again, we're talking about the Mets adding to the bullpen. If they're done in the starting pitching category, adding to the bullpen and adding two big bats. You re-sign Pete Alonso, you skip out on Santander, and you make a trade for Luis Robert Jr. I'm happy with that. Let's go into the 2025 season opening day, and let's see what happens. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure to comment your thoughts and opinions. Smash the like buttons on this video. Until next time, Mets fans, it's your boy CP. Peace out.